What's a wild story that you'll never forget from high school? Story 1. This was a difficult time. In the mid-1980s, our school had limited security, just one guard, who was often the target of jokes and wasn't particularly well-liked. His ninth-grade daughter, however, was a lovely person. She was kind, quiet, and well-liked, without being part of any exclusive groups. She had a bit of a distinctive style, with a fondness for metal music and a certain look. I always thought highly of her, and we had mutual friends. Unfortunately, she was dating someone who was known to be problematic. He was the kind of person that most guys disliked, even within his own circle. He was the type of individual that people warned girls about, but often, those warnings weren't heeded because he presented himself so charmingly. Everyone must have just been envious, or so the narrative went. Seriously, I had a negative impression of him from the moment I heard a particularly unsavory story about him. They broke up. Shortly after, he and some associates entered the school and made a large number of photocopies. These copies depicted her in a very private and compromising manner, with highly explicit content. These images were placed everywhere, in lockers, scattered on floors and walls, spray tacked to windows, and found in various places like drawers and library books for weeks afterward. While her father was at the school before students arrived, likely trying to address the situation, his car was also targeted and covered with these images. I never saw her again after that. Her father continued to work at the school. I wouldn't have. The person responsible for this act returned to school after a brief period and seemingly faced no lasting social repercussions. Story 2. There was an incident where a teacher physically restrained a student. Instead of immediate dismissal, the school administration stated they would address the matter at the end of the academic year. Subsequently, this teacher began posting inappropriate content online, including explicit images of himself, tagging individuals in the entertainment industry, and making suggestive requests. He also shared a video of himself engaging in drug use and self-inflicted body modifications, again in a state of undress. Some students discovered his online activity, and it quickly spread throughout the school the following day. Midway through a class, law enforcement officers entered the room, took the teacher into custody, and escorted him from the premises. I haven't received any information about him since that day. Story 3. That morning, a disagreement over a food item escalated quickly. At lunchtime, it had unfortunately led to widespread tension on campus. My friends and I were heading to Subway when two individuals who appeared to be security personnel approached us and instructed us to return to campus. During the final 15 minutes of the lunch period, the open central area of the campus became a gathering of several hundred students. A physical altercation occurred between two female students, one of whom was white and the other black, and then their respective companions became involved. The agricultural sciences teacher, who was wearing protective gear, was injured. Someone made contact with a security officer. Non-lethal methods were used by the school resource officer and one of the administrators. I found myself in the midst of a portion of the crowd when I suddenly heard a loud announcement. I turned to see a vehicle driving across the grass toward me. Additional law enforcement arrived to help manage the situation. When I arrived at my next class, physical education, we were directed to remain in the gymnasium and listen for announcements. Eventually, the school buses were brought in earlier than usual, and we were dismissed by bus number with instructions to proceed directly to the bus. I recall seeing several officers in protective gear with less lethal shotguns, directing us to stay on the designated walkways and move directly to the buses without stopping. We were dismissed from school for several days, and upon our return, the atmosphere had changed significantly. The lunch period was shortened, campus access was restricted, and the younger and older student groups were permanently separated. Story 4. 5 individuals in my junior year decided to engage in a contest to see who could be the father of the most children by the end of the school year. The final count: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Growing up in a relatively conservative community, I can only imagine the difficult conversations and the emotional toll this would have taken on everyone involved: the individuals, the young women, their families, and the children. It seems like a deeply regrettable way to impact so many lives. How unfortunate and challenging. Story 5. I attended an expensive private high school with a student body comprised of affluent individuals. Due to the school's emphasis on maintaining a positive environment and the significant privilege some students possessed, I witnessed situations that likely would have resulted in serious consequences in other settings. The most shocking incident involved a student who was often targeted by a bully. The bully discovered that the student had a severe peanut allergy. One day, the bully consumed a peanut butter confection, licked his finger, and then pursued the allergic student throughout the cafeteria, laughing in a disturbing manner and attempting to touch him. Sadly, there wasn't an opportunity for anyone else to intervene before he managed to make contact with the student's arm. The student immediately experienced a severe allergic reaction and had to be rushed to the emergency room. The bully received a 2-week suspension. The affected student's parents considered pursuing legal action, but some form of resolution was reached, and the entire incident was subsequently kept private. Story 6. I attended military school, and there were numerous memorable events. One of the tactical officers had an incident involving a firearm with a student. He was dismissed from his position and, rather quickly, was employed by a competing military institution. My English teacher was a Vietnam War veteran and an avid motorcyclist. Someone had taken the knob from his old classroom radiator back in the mid-1970s, and he declared that he wouldn't turn on the heat and would keep the windows open during the winter until that exact knob was returned. He would be in a short-sleeved shirt while we students were bundled up in our winter coats, shivering. He kept a bucket near his desk. It contained various items he felt like putting in it: chalk dust, pencil shavings, and sometimes other things. He would often threaten to throw the bucket on anyone who fell asleep. I never personally witnessed him do it, but there were persistent rumors. What he would do if you dozed off was give the bottom of your desk a hard kick with his heavy boots. I saw him do that many times. Interestingly, despite his eccentricities, he was one of the most impactful teachers I ever had. He introduced me to many fascinating concepts I had never encountered before. That school was a place where unusual things happened. Looking back, I think my experiences there have left a lasting impression on me. Story 7. The science teacher at school found me with some cannabis. After taking it from me, he asked if I could meet him later in the day. When I went to his office, he returned it, commenting that it was of good quality, and inquired if I could obtain some for him. Story 8. Our principal drove a small, lightweight vehicle, so, one year, a group of seniors collaborated to lift it and relocate it into the cafeteria as a senior prank. On another occasion, my Latin teacher became intoxicated and made threats towards a friend of mine. Additionally, my history teacher had a habit of coming to school under the influence until one day he simply ceased to appear. He had often jokingly mentioned running away to Mexico, and it turned out he actually did. He had no employment, no financial resources, and didn't speak any Spanish. He resided there for approximately a decade before being apprehended and returned to the United States where, rather ironically, he moved to Texas and became a school principal. Story 9. A substitute teacher and paraprofessional initiated a step team at the school. The school principal seemed to have a strong disapproval of this team, seemingly based on its cultural expression. She would review their performances and then cancel them at school assemblies, citing concerns about violence or sexual content, even though the performances were simply high-energy, coordinated routines of stomping, clapping, chanting, and popping and locking that were meaningful to the black students at the school. At one assembly where the step team was denied the opportunity to perform, the cheerleading squad presented a deliberately provocative routine. Their performance included a prolonged period where they were lying on the gymnasium floor with their legs spread and engaging in suggestive movements. They did this in solidarity with the step team, as those students recognized the unfairness of the situation. Following their performance, the step team took to the stage and performed their routine without official permission. The audience responded with applause, and I observed the teacher who led the team leaving the gymnasium with a clear sense of pride. The substitute teacher was subsequently dismissed from her position. Story 10. Honestly, the food fight. It was the last day of senior year at a massive high school, around 3,000 students. The cafeteria was enormous, probably about 3/4 the size of a football field, easily holding a few hundred kids per lunch period. A student circulated, announcing at 12:14, food fight, and this person had a way of making it believable. At precisely 12:14, the cry of food fight rang out, and the place erupted. The student who had made the announcement inadvertently made eye contact with me as he yelled and launched a handful of blueberries. I watched, almost in slow motion, as blueberries found their targets one by one. One even hit my leg. Without hesitation, I grabbed my plate of chicken nuggets. I'd gotten extra honey mustard that day and sent it flying into the chaos. Throwing that plate felt more satisfying than tossing my graduation cap. I took a moment to take it all in, and it was complete pandemonium. There were lettuce leaves and sandwiches flying everywhere. people yelling while covered in every imaginable condiment. I snapped back to action, grabbed my friend's slushie, bit the straw like I was pulling a grenade pin, and hurled it into the fray. The entire event lasted less than a minute, but that was all it took. The cafeteria looked like a battlefield. By the end, all the tables in the central area were cleared. Spaghetti was literally hanging from the high ceilings, and one student was lying in the middle, seemingly defeated, covered in food from every serving station. It was like something straight out of a movie. I'll always feel fortunate to have been a part of that. I still see the student who started it occasionally and always thank them. The best part, and what still stands out, is that not a single person faced any repercussions. Story 11. There was an English teacher who wasn't very well liked. It was common knowledge that she kept a hidden supply of alcohol in her desk drawer and would discreetly add it to her coffee. On one occasion, some students tampered with her beverage. Shortly after, she became unwell during class. However, the most concerning incident involved a substance being added to her coffee. The situation escalated significantly, and she required medical assistance. She was eventually attended to by emergency medical personnel and transported from the school. I didn't see her again for the remainder of the academic year. Story 12. It was senior skip day, and a group of us went out to a remote area for some fun. One of the students was riding a dirt bike along the dirt road we had all driven in on. I didn't witness it directly, but about 25 minutes after we arrived, he lost control and collided with a pine tree. The impact was severe. It was a tragic and sudden event that cast a pall over the entire day. Story 13. When a girl accused my friend and me of a serious misunderstanding at a donut shop across from our high school at 7:00 a.m. She claimed we had made inappropriate comments. We were actually discussing her Ford Mustang, and we had no idea she was even nearby or who she was. She was a junior and we were sophomores, so we hadn't met. Our mutual friends stood up for us, saying we wouldn't have acted in that way. To make matters worse, the authorities questioned us without our parents present. We were only 16 at the time. We never encountered her at school. She exhibited behavior that was difficult, even for the time. Story 14. One year, the senior class initiated a series of lighthearted pranks involving the removal of small, easily reassembled items around the school. Things like outlet covers, teachers' staplers, and window locks were carefully taken apart, with all the components and screws left neatly at the scene. While the impact on the school's functionality was minimal, it did create a noticeable inconvenience for the staff. This continued for several months without anyone being identified, until one of the participants became overconfident and began collecting the disassembled items in their locker. Then, during a routine security check, which was standard procedure at the school, the authorities opened one of the lockers, and the accumulated pieces spilled out. Their activities were officially discovered. The student whose locker was searched revealed the identities of the other 3 individuals involved, and all of them gained a unique form of recognition. Not notoriety, but a sort of positive notoriety. The principal even acknowledged their ingenuity, admitting that they likely wouldn't have been discovered without an unexpected turn of events during the security check. They ended up with a full-page feature in a yearbook titled The Assembly Crew, funded by the school's faculty and staff. As for their consequences, since their actions were discovered so close to the end of the school year, traditional disciplinary measures weren't deemed practical. Instead, the staff decided that they would assist the maintenance team for 2 weeks during the summer break, helping to reassemble the items and providing general support as needed. This approach seemed fitting, as the maintenance staff were the ones most directly affected by their actions and the increased workload. So the resolution was quite appropriate for that group. That's the story. Story 15. The star athlete, who it's fair to say had a rather inflated ego, was a well-liked but often overbearing individual. He had a tendency to intimidate others, particularly those who weren't interested in athletics, viewing their pursuits as unimportant. I recall seeing him visibly upset, with tears in his eyes, being comforted by his girlfriend. He was upset about someone's harsh words, who had told him that his achievements peaked in high school and that he wouldn't amount to anything. They had also criticized his chances of making a living in professional sports, suggested that people only pretended to like him out of fear or pity, and dismissed the admiration he received from some adults as blind support for football, deeming his future prospects as ultimately meaningless, even with a potential NFL career. A few weeks later, I learned that his academic performance was quite poor. The water bottle he always carried was discovered to contain alcohol. He was caught and suspended from the football team for a period. From what I understood, despite his family's financial resources, he did not succeed academically in college and was known to be a difficult person to deal with. Story 16. I have two stories to share. The first involves a classroom incident where a student was being disruptive, and the teacher, from an older generation, lost their temper and used a highly inappropriate and offensive phrase. The teacher was subsequently asked to retire early. The second story concerns our debate team's trip to New York for a competition. During the trip, some students acquired and used an illegal substance in their school-funded hotel room. Given the background of the student body, the consequences for the students involved were minimal, while the teacher who discovered and reported the incident faced more significant repercussions. Story 17. When I was 16, I simply greeted a girl at a party. The following school day, her boyfriend and two of his friends sought me out in class. When my teacher intervened, they became aggressive and, in a shocking turn of events, physically confronted the principal. It was certainly the most dramatic reaction I've ever experienced from a casual interaction at a social gathering. Story 18. There was a student in the grade above me who had a private online account where he was sharing personal content. The content was unusual and focused on a particular interest. The descriptions were about how this interest made him feel. His stepbrother was also a student at our school, so someone mentioned the account to his stepbrother out of concern for the student. His brother seemed disappointed and mentioned something about them having dealt with similar issues before and that they were addressing it. I still think about this person, now likely an adult, from time to time. I hope they are doing okay. Story 19. A senior at my high school found a suspicious device under his car when he was leaving the school parking lot. Authorities were contacted, and they confirmed it was a real explosive device, though it was intentionally designed not to detonate. It turned out that his father had been involved in a contentious business deal that had upset some people. This incident was believed to be a way of sending a warning. Story 20. The chemistry teacher, who was in her 30s, and while known for being strict, was also considered attractive, had some personal photos from her younger years surface. These photos quickly circulated among the students. It caused quite a stir at school, and she ended up taking some time off until the end of the school year.
That's a wrap for this video. Make sure to leave your relatable story down in the comments. I would love to make a video on them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.